a session on low carbon materials and why they still matter in a world gone mad. That could also be subtext as hands up if you actually want to survive. Good. So half the people in the world's greatest democracy, reputedly, have voted for a man with contempt for autocratic ambitions and who is an incompetent economist. Are they mad or just easily fooled? It was Don Watson who said that, but I had to paraphrase him slightly. And Senator David Pocock said, "It still shocks me that public policy is consistently shaped by political considerations ahead of evidence and research." Dr. Joelle Gurgis from the CSIRO, recently an IPCC lead author, said, "Nothing good can come from attacking scientists. We are speaking up because we care about what is happening to our planet." Recently, mandatory disclosure of climate impacts has been instituted in Australia's largest 200 companies, and they are running around like chooks with their heads chopped off, trying to work out what that means and how to make it work, because basically it means greenwash no longer washes. So if you were going to build a brick wall, who would you call? I would strongly advise you'd call a bricklayer, because otherwise you'll get the results on the left rather than something really nice like on the right. Whereas what we're seeing in public policy so much is people who ignore science and go against evidence directing public policy. That's a photo of Dr. Joelle Gurgis on the lower half of the screen there, and the other types are in the top half. So, why low carbon materials matter, even in a world gone mad? Who wants to survive? Like the mythical boiling frog, humans will inflict real damage, pain and suffering before taking decisive action on global heating. The well-known ratbag George of Patonga is quoted as saying that one. So today I have with me Nick Sowden on the left, Sowden Building Solutions, very experienced expert builder. Tracy Graham, Connected Design, very experienced and expert building designer. And myself, Dick Clarke, who was one of the ratbags that snuck in. So, look, the USA may have gone mad, but they are increasingly alone, at least for now. The EU, China and other trading partners are still heading towards a low-carbon economy. The USA may return to sanity in 3.5 years' time, but it will be damaged and belittled. Global heating, however, is not slowing down and is not waiting 3.5 years. It's on track for 2 degrees or more over pre-industrial levels. And now we need uber-resilient buildings more than ever. And apart from anything else, a low-carbon material is just the right thing to do. What is a low-carbon material? This is just a very brief intro. It's stuff basically that is part of an ecological supply and demand chain that is met by natural forces, i.e. it does not contribute to global heating. So there's a bunch of materials that meet this list. Timber and timber derivatives, obviously, mud brick, earth building, straw bale. Interestingly, some years ago, it's actually coming up for 20, Tracy designed the Southern Hemisphere and possibly the world's largest straw bale building, which you can still see out at Fairfield in the Fairfield Showground, called the Nullawalla Centre. Hempcrete is another one. Any reused material, obviously, and some recycled, but not all recycled materials. So just cruising through that list and picking one at random, we thought we'd look at hempcrete today, for no particular reason other than it's our favourite. So what is it? Basically, it's a hemp lime composite. You take hydrated lime, water, and the hurd from the inner part of the industrial hemp plant. So do not attempt to smoke this building. You'll die of old age before anything happens. And that undergoes a pozzolanic reaction, and you get an end result that looks a little bit like petrification. That's an oversimplification, but that's sort of what it looks like. It's high insulation value, and importantly, it's very good at allowing water vapour, to transmit through the wall so that the usual imbalance of water vapour in buildings where the interior typically has a higher net annual water vapour load than external, it allows that to balance out and therefore reduces condensation. So, it's good for farmers. It's great for remediating soil. It's sequestering carbon while it's growing. It requires a no-till process for resowing. It can be processed locally, which is great for local economies. And there are multiple product options, and we're going to get into that in some detail with the two experts on my left. When it hits the building, great insulation values. In the usual form in walls, a 300 thick wall is about R3.4 if it's got a little bit of sand added. If you go for an uber lightweight version with no sand added, then it's actually higher again, and that's what's used for insulation. Vapour permeable, as I said, and it's fireproof up to BAL FZ, flame zone rated. Has good acoustic, especially with conversational noise, that kind of level of frequencies. And during the process of curing, it undergoes a carbonation that actually sequesters even more CO2. So, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Various formats, as I said, and the most common that we've seen in Australia to date is what's called in situ. So there are forms used and the hemp is placed, the forms are raised and the wall is basically built up around a structural load-bearing timber frame. The new format with blocks that are coming out, produced in WA and Victoria at the moment. And then panels are currently being developed as well. That's a bit of a watch this space with the panels. So there are various people working on those, and that has a potential to reduce cost and increase speed dramatically. It can be applied as a spray, typically for insulation purposes. So, I'm going to ask, I think, throwing to Trace in the first place, what was it that attracted you to hemp as a building material?
Make sure this works. Hi. So I didn't know anything about Hempcrete until we had our first client who found Nick some way on high pages maybe. And Nick came along. I had specified Hebel, which is also a great option. I was under a flight path in Marrickville. I wanted something that met the acoustics requirement, thermal requirement, of course fire related, because we're all the properties on the boundary. And the boundary stuff we'll talk about later. But Nick said, how about Hempcrete? And I went, hemp what? And he explained how he'd been to a site in Japan with a 300-year-old Hempcrete building. And the more I researched it, I went, it ticks all the boxes. It does my thermal, it does my acoustics, it's breathable, vapour permeable. Our client had asthma, there was mould in the house. And the more I went through it, most building materials come through plastic in some way. If you're trying to do your best with your insulation, you're trying to pick the one that's best. What is it made of? Where does it come from? Where does it go at the end of its life? And most products I couldn't say to clients and justifiably, but hemp comes from the earth, we grow it, we use it. I built the Hempcrete walls, we've got some great photos. And at the end of its life, the waste material can be decomposed and I put it in the compost bins at the community garden. So it's that life cycle of a product. And so we shared it with the client and the client went, okay.
So, Nick...
and that was the start of that.
What and how did you first come to it? What was it that attracted you?
Again, I'd heard about it. First time I heard about it, I sort of disregarded it. And then I heard about it again. I went, actually, I think I should really listen to this. Because it does tick all the boxes. As Tracy's just explained, it's acoustic, it's great thermally. A big thing for a builder as well was controlling the humidity inside of a house and making it a healthy home for the client and basically de-risk a house for people to live in. It's also quite easy to work with. So with a little bit of experience and a little bit of training, anyone can be in there building with hemp, under the guidance of the builder, I would say, as well. But the physical parts, putting the hemp in, is not physically straining. and it's a great team effort as well. And yeah, that's how I really started with that. Visiting Miyasa in Japan, which was a 300-year-old build, even after all the earthquakes, 2011, and that was still standing. That was a big hats off, like it's solid. And as Dick was saying, it does petrify over time. So the older it gets, the harder it gets as well.
And can I also say, in terms of 10 years ago, there was a lot of talk about condensation risk, and there still is, and a lot of builders are still not responding to it. But when we looked at Hempcrete, it seemed like a no-brainer that condensation was less of a problem as a product.
That's a really interesting point. So as we increasingly make buildings more airtight, and the building code is heading in that direction, and yet has not yet mandated any kind of air management system that means you know you're getting air exchange and managing internal humidity build-up, buildings are increasingly risking condensation and then mould, and lawsuits have already happened. And no one wants to go there because no one wins a court case except the lawyers. So with the kind of hempcrete that you guys have been designing and installing, I think most of it, if not all so far, has been in situ. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so describe the changes that you had to make, Nick, on site in terms of managing the formwork and, you know, not just the changes in terms of the equipment and materials that you had to order, but the psychology of dealing with your trades as well.
Actually, the trades weren't too bad. A lot of it also comes down to at the start with the design. So if you can get the water services out of the hempcrete walls, so instead of having a bathroom or a shower on an external wall, also I'm a builder as well, I don't like chopping up my formwork. That's a price thing. But if you can get things out of the hempcrete wall and put them into more internal walls, that works great. All the guys on site, it's exciting. They're doing something new, doing something exciting. So there was a lot of buy-in from everyone. Everyone made the obvious jokes, which quickly stopped after we've done 4 or 5 of these builds. The Sparkies enjoyed it because rough-in was actually quite easy for them. It also depends on exactly where you've got your formwork, where you've got your frame. There's different configurations that you can do. But in general, little things like would bring our water pipes up through the slab for a kitchen rather than putting them in the walls. So that made it really easy when we're going to frame up. Plumbers not having to rough in through all the stud work, so that made them quite happy. Window installs, that's always done in-house, and that's been designed out and drawn out beforehand, which is something that Tracy does a sensational job with all of her builds, instead of trying to work it out on site. Thank you.
So, Trace, as a building designer, and the detailed documentation that you invariably get called on to produce, what changes did you have to make to adapt to hempcrete?
In the initial stages of the design, it just meant that every BA that I did, the wall was always 200. So in the inner city, I know the walls could go to 230, 400, but I found 200 was the minimum that we could go. So instead of having like a 140 wall on the plans, I always aspired that we would hopefully have a hempcrete build. It doesn't always work out that way. Hempcrete's not the answer for every project, and we know that. And I just want to go back a step too, just so people who don't understand, hempcrete in this context that we've used for our 6 projects is not load bearing. So it's standard timber frame construction. It's a 90 mil wall that the builders build normally. We've even had a project where the timber frames were delivered on site, put together, and then Nick and his team would put blockers out and some formwork, and then you come in. As the photo cycles through, you'll see the hemp that's made with the sand and the lime and the water. It felt like we were making Anzac cookies. And for every single site, I spent an entire day And I just love being on the building site. That's where you learn the most, is when you're actually seeing the materials, seeing the detail. So when I get back to the drawing board, I totally understand that thing that is that big on my drawing, I can put it together and it makes so much more sense. And so you slowly start moving this hemp mixture into the wall, packing it. And Nick comes along with his whip and tells you not too tight. Because the reason you don't want it too tight is because the air is what insulates the building. Do you want to take your fingers or your rod very gently and you're tamping it in? Because you want it, your instinct is to make it hard, but you don't need to because the hemp will cure, and over time it becomes harder. And so slowly over time you build your wall up, and then you put some new formwork, and then the first point of that first board coming down of the formwork is so exciting because it's actually marvellous. So that's what it looks like in that photo. You're thinking, wow, like how is that possible that it's still staying in its place? So this is the first Marrickville Hempcrete house that we did together, and that was the wall that we left exposed and finished with water glass. So going back to your thing, the more I'm on a building site, the more I understand the detail, the more I know what we need. Where is the window sitting in the wall? All of our builds have different cladding options. We've either put weatherboard or timber or colour bond or standing seam. So if you don't want a house that looks like a hempcrete hippie house, well, you don't have to have one. It can be as modern and clean as you want.
So that issue, when you're building something in situ, the mix, obviously, because it's a prescribed chemical reaction, the accuracy of the mix is very important, and the degree of tamping, because that affects density, density affects R value, etc.
And also price.
Yes,
and
indeed.
material.
So in the other products we did in the intro, panels and blocks, that is done off-site by the manufacturer. So those issues of density and consistency are taken in the factory. And in many ways, the advantage of off-site building, as we know from lots of other people that have talked about it over the years, is that because it's in a controlled environment, you've got absolute consistency, or at least the potential for absolute consistency. Whereas on site, it does require a degree of oversight that needs to, one of the jobs that I was first involved with was a house for some triplets with muscular dystrophy out in rural New South Wales in the Central West. And it was built entirely by volunteers. It's a big house. I mean, the hallway down the centre is 3 metres wide because these kids are in motorised wheelchairs. When I say kids, they've just finished their HSC, for heaven's sake. But they're in motorised wheelchairs and they had to be able to pass each other without hitting things. And so it's a big building, and so a lot of volunteers were used, and the consistency of the hemp is, we would look at it and go, oh, it's not terribly good, but the parents of these kids, the lovely family, say, look, we know that there are some things that aren't quite right, that there's a little bit of cracking here and there, but because it was built with love, we call those love cracks. So it's kind of, and interestingly, it does not affect the thermal performance or the air tightness of the building at all. They're just visual.
Was that built with the volunteers that came on site and helped?
Yeah. Yeah. So they had one carpenter building formwork and everybody else was a volunteer, totally unskilled, just locals from Canowindra and Orange and other places.
It's probably why I like it, because I see the world in pictures, but I'm not a great builder. I struggle with the nail and hammer, but learning on the building site, it was simple enough that I could do it and really be part of the build, and which is often you leave the drawing board and you let it go and you go to site, but you're not on there. But actually being on site with the builders and being one of the tradies it's pretty good.
Yeah. So that photo there is the new Lithgow area women's shed. Yes, blokes, women's sheds are a thing, and they're a bloody good thing. And it was built with a lot of volunteer labour, but under expert supervision, and that building is fantastic. The quality is perfect. It's a magnificent thing. It's under construction at the moment. So, obstacles. Let's talk about the hard stuff.
So over time, and then over the development in the last 10 years, so 2015 was the first Hempcrete build that Tracy and I have done together. Things have changed over time. We had a bit of an oopsie on our first build where we had a lintel, which is a solid timber over the top of a window, and it's quite a large section, and that delaminated. So from that, we went, all right, we can understand why this is happening. How are we going to fix it? So we used screws, washers, renderers mesh, recast it, and it stayed, and it's worked. From there, when we were doing a duplex down in Kirrawee, we spent an entire day trying to get over a roof junction which went straight on top of the lintel. So we were putting hempcrete the whole way across. It was brutal because you had the constraint of a roof over you, so you're having to pack it in sideways, which is time consuming. And we went, there has to be a better way. We're not actually getting any vapor permeability through there because the LVL is vapor permeable. So we were like, okay, what other materials do we have that are going to get us to the right thickness and we can just move forward really quickly? And at that point, the only product that we could readily get was EPS. So, polystyrene? XPS. Or EPS. EPS, sorry. So we screwed that on and we kept moving. It's not the greatest product in the world because it's a petrochemical product. Moving along, so the picture you can see here is another big opening with lintels on it. We've used what's called wood fibre insulation, which you can now get in Australia quite easily. It's a wood derivative product and it just ticks a lot more boxes. This was all rendered afterwards as well, so it takes render the same as the hempcrete, and it's just, environmentally, it's a much better product to use. So that's one place where we've moved ahead. Also, the first hempcrete wall we did, which was that beautiful finished wall you saw before over in Marrickville, this one here. So it's all there, it's on display. We were using what's called bugle head screws. So you put them in, you leave a block in place, stop the form boards from moving in or out, because they do have a tendency to do that. You'd have to place hemp in there, back out the screw a tiny bit, pull the block out, try to remember to pull every block out, otherwise you've got a nice little square on the wall. Now, when I was originally taught how to build with hempcrete, the theory was pull it out, let it dry, then pack it afterwards. When I was doing some training lessons, running a workshop, started putting blocks in the walls and leaving them there to show everyone how to patch it. And we started patching it while it was wet. And I went, oh, actually, this works really well. So since then, it disappears, you can't see it. It was a much better job. So that's changed. Also, the screws have changed as well. So originally, as I said, we were using bugle screws. The top part is a clean shank. So anything that's on it can slide in and out. And Worth and Spax have 100% threaded screws. So your form workers go along with one block, they screw it in, they take the block out at that point, you're not leaving it in the wall anymore, and the patching's not as much. So there's been things that have changed over time. That's come from experience, running these workshops. We've always passed this information on as well. Learn from other people's mistakes rather than your own. And if you make yours, tell everyone about it.
Quick urgent call to the techies. The laptop's about to run out of battery power. There we go. Thank you very much. Trace, did you have any obstacles that you needed to overcome?
In the first Marrickville house, it was a real learning curve. Lucky it was for my best friend who was from my mother's group, because we spent many countless hours talking about details. But one of the challenges was acoustics. So if you've been to Marrickville, you might know there's a lot of aeroplanes that go over. And so we had to, this is the first project we had, so we had to convince the certifier through the help of the hemp masonry company, we could give them the package that we met all the requirements of the NCC. Then we needed to complete an acoustic report and convince the acoustic engineer that Hempcrete would meet the acoustic requirements of this very loud planes that would go over. And it was interesting because there are a lot of reports about thermal performance for hempcrete. It's just a no-brainer. But when it comes to acoustics, we had to dig and dig and dig and find reputable reports that the acoustic engineer would go, oh, yeah, of course, like we'll go way past that, even with the 200 mil wall. And I can tell you, as a homeowner of a hempcrete house, I can't really explain it, but I hear other people, hempcrete homeowners, there's a real comfort in a natural building, the way it holds the sound. So we're in Marrickville as well, we can slightly hear the planes, but it's not as bad as what it would be. So probably acoustics was an issue. And one of the things that I still can't fathom is you can use hempcrete in a flame zone building, but we can't use it on a boundary where we need a 60-60-60. And that's because it just hasn't been tested. So get tested is $40,000, and we're just aren't at that point to actually do that. So just as you know, you can use it in flame zone in the bush areas, but it's one detail that we haven't managed to get through on boundaries.
That's an issue which the Australian Hemp Council is working on, and that along with other issues to do with the building code. So that job I showed you a couple back on at Lithgow, that's a commercial public building, and so it's under the National Construction Code Volume 1. All of the residential buildings, of course, are under Volume 2. Volume 2 allows for expert opinion on various things. Volume 1 does not. Volume 1 says you have to meet verification methods of testing, and there's no way around it. And so the Australian Hemp Council brought together a bunch of people across the industry. So this is designers, builders, installers, people who are coming from the in situ side of things, blockwork side of things, panel side of things. So a very broad group of people to basically write an Australian standard that the National Construction Code will recognise and certifiers have confidence to sign off on. So that's a work in progress at the moment. That's happening and very exciting. One of the things we discovered when we started the preparatory work for that was we were looking at weatherproofing hemp buildings and discovered that there is no Australian standard on render. Now, we've been doing render for thousands of years as human civilisations, and yet somehow we've got to 2025 without an Australian standard on render. I guess it just works, doesn't it? You know, well, that doesn't cut it with the National Construction Code. So watch this space. There's a lot going to happen there. The other thing that we decided we might want to talk about is the roof systems. And a lot of this has to do with whether you're going down the passive house route, whether you've got aircraft noise, or what your climate zone is in terms of...
But also how big your build is.
Yes. Yeah. So, Trace, from your point of view, what sort of considerations go through your mind when you're thinking about that?
So in quite a few of our projects, we did timber stud walls, did the hempcrete, and then try to get the roof on as quickly as we could. In most cases, that was a structurally insulated panel, which is a corrugated sheeting with polystyrene in the middle, which is not great, but metal sheeting at the bottom. And that's what it looks like there. So that's my house in Marrickville. The reason why we do it is because it's a monolithic system. It gave me an R5.4 for the roof, and within a day, Nick and his team had the roof on. I didn't have rafters, insulation, vapor permeable membranes, battens, tinning, like it was just a really great system. And for the ceiling, very good question, is it's colour bond, but it was a great opportunity to batten and then do gyprock ceiling. And in that cavity, which wasn't then thermally upset by the sparkies and everybody doing their work, I could then put my downlights or any other electrical that I wanted to do. But on bigger jobs, when I job in Kirrawee, which was a duplex, much, much bigger build, we did the timber walls, we did the roof, and then we did the hempcrete. And it was great fun at the end of the day trying to get hempcrete at the top of the walls, under the roof. I can tell you, your arms were exhausted. So both have benefits.
Also, with the Kirrawee project, the hempcrete install on that was about 3.5 weeks, and it rained for pretty much 3.5 weeks. So I'm so glad that we actually put the roofs on first. The job that we're looking at here, this is actually Tracy's house. So we did this in 2019,
5 years ago.
2020. And that's when we had the bushfires. That photo was taken in February, the day after the water broke. You know where I was at midnight that night pushing water off tarps? Because we didn't have a roof on. We had tarps over the whole lot, temporary beams up there, and yeah.
So really, if you've got a really big build, you probably won't want to do it that way. But ours was only upstairs about 30 square metres, so it was manageable. You know, Nick been there at midnight pushing water off tarps, but you wouldn't want to be doing that for days and days.
I wouldn't want to
Did you
do
get
that.
a video?
He
No,
didn't tell me.
she was asleep in bed.
Oh, rats. It's interesting because our general technique is to do the roof on, put the roof on first, for the reasons that the climate is so unpredictable. You just never know what's going to happen. So, Nick, tell us about this.
All right, so this photo here, we had roof off, but we've used hemp as the insulator. So that's hemp going in between the rafters. It's going onto a permanent formwork, which stays underneath the rafter, and it's got battens under there to create that void so we can put downlights in there as well. This system here, you can have tarps over it, it can rain. It's pretty fail-safe when you're doing it this way. But if you're using SIP systems or more traditional sort of roof, actually this works really well.
Was that in an aircraft noise zone?
Yeah.
And what sort of rating did you have to achieve, and what did you get?
Oh, you're making me go back 10 years. But my memory was it was a 50 we needed to achieve, and the hemp didn't really cut it in this format, but we used, at the time, magnesium, 13 mils. Actually, it was magnesium oxide board because we needed the weight and the security of the water vapour, and that got us through because of the density of the board.
Okay, and what thickness was that?
Pretty sure it was 13 mils.
No, the depth of hemp.
The rafters were probably 190, 200.
The 190s.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. The other aspect of hemp, I guess, is in terms of its how it feels to live in. We're consistently getting feedback from clients that it's just a joy to live with, and that's whether they're looking at a rendered finish over who knows what internally. You know, could be blocks, could be in situ. The different external cladding's kind of irrelevant once you're inside the building. But have you found that as a similar kind of feedback from clients, that they're just continuing years and decades even?
I still get photos of thermometers and children running around the house in the middle of winter, very comfortable. Or the flip side, being in summer. Remember one time I was at the cricket, it was 46 degrees when the ashes were on, and I think it got to about 26 inside the house without air conditioning. So that's a pretty phenomenal effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find I've got a little thermometer that I'm tracking at the moment, and the coldest it probably gets is 18, which is a bit cold because the old part of the house lets us down. We've still got a bit of draft sealing to do. We've got a few cracks that we've got to deal with in the floor, so that's the owner responsibility. But the old part of the house, upstairs in the bedrooms we sleep with the window open all year. We don't use the doona. Often we actually find it quite hot. And then in the summer, if we do close all the windows and use the aircon, it's only on for an hour, and that'll keep that upstairs level quite cool for 4, 5, 6 hours, or for most of the night. So once it is cooled, it retains that cool, the word that we love to use.
Okay, let's talk about bathrooms. Oops, I'm going the wrong way here. Bathroom finishes, and Nick, you mentioned before about planning for that. Oh, that photo on the right, by the way, is a blower door test for those who are unfamiliar with making buildings airtight, which is mandatory for passive house. Basically, you pump the building full of air up to a certain pressure, about 50 pascals, which is probably about enough to make your ears just pop a little bit. And then you measure the air leakage rates to demonstrate that you've achieved airtightness. And we've got various details that we're still kind of evolving to achieve the most cost-effective way of getting air tightness for passive house with hemp, because it's still fairly new. But that's kind of long and involved, and it involves drawings, and probably not for here. So, moving on from that, talking about bathrooms, the photo on the left, I think is that one of yours, Trace? When you're setting up a design for a bathroom, you've got the option of putting frames inside, outside. How do you approach it?
In this photo, probably the thing where I have the input is I'm trying to keep this, what Nick was saying before, in terms of keeping the fixtures off the walls as much you can, and plumbing on the internal timber stud walls. So we tried our best with that, and you've got to think ahead of the picture of where are your rails going, where, and, downstairs in different photos. If people want to have paintings, letting them know early that we need to put in some formwork early for that, or allowing for picture rails, or knowing we're going to have to hang things from the ceiling. And in this, it's really Nick would batten the wall, fill a board, and then waterproof, just like any other project.
Yeah. Nick, what would you add to that?
It's very easy for a standard builder or carpenter to make that a waterproof bathroom and then come in and tile it. Now, we were talking about this bathroom the other day, and this was out of Mudgee, this one?
Yeah, so west of Mudgee. Gratai is the locality, if anyone knows it.
Anyway, Dick's like, oh, I love this. It's this lime polished wall. I'm like, yeah, Marrakesh, I love it. I was thinking about doing it in my bathroom in the wet area, but I just didn't have the guts to do it.
Yeah, okay. This is one of the family of Venetian plasters. This one's called Marrakesh. It is eye-wateringly beautiful. I cannot describe to you. You really need to see it to understand just how beautiful this render is. You wouldn't think that something physical like that could just make you kind of go, oh, wow. And I've seen a lot of stuff, and I just went, oh, wow. Sadly, the renderer who did this, who was an expert renderer, passed away 6 months later. So we can't even kind of drag him along into the glory of it. And this is 11 years old now. But that was hempcrete on 3 sides of that room. So we didn't have the option of taking the kind of most cost-effective route of putting the plumbing on internal timber frame walls. It had to go in the hempcrete, and we knew we were going to render. But we basically had to set it up so that the membrane, the waterproof membrane in the shower, would be applied to the hempcrete, that the tap work was all blocked out from the frame, and then the render was applied, and then to put a second kind of belt and braces on the render there so that the render wouldn't look wet after you'd had a shower, it was sealed with a strangely named material called black soap, which, as you can see, is far from black and doesn't look anything like soap. But it basically means that, and this is not a low-budget bathroom, not by any means. And this is its, well, that's the house that it sits in, and that's the other bathroom in the house done in a different colour scheme, but exactly the same materials and system. This is not the budget is not for the faint-hearted. So putting the plumbing on internal timber walls is by far the most cost-effective way to do it. If you put it on an external wall and you want a rendered finish, it can be done, but it is not cheap. And look, let's be honest, Marrakesh as a render finish is not cheap no matter what substrate you put it on. It's about $450 a square metre, and that's before you've done any of the prep work for the membrane behind the system. So it's not a cheap system. And the reason I'm making a point about that is that a lot of people assume that hempcrete build is a kind of hippie thing, like that lovely bloke who did it on Grand Designs in Tasmania a couple of months ago. Really lovely house. His way of doing hempcrete is not generally our way of doing hempcrete at all. And so you can achieve extremely high levels of finishes with hempcrete. But like with everything, it comes with a price. Now, we've got 10 minutes to go, and we're supposed to have a Q&A. I saw a hand go up.
G'day, Dick. How are you?
Hey, Johan.
Can you let me know the order from Hempcrete to the tile or to the external finish? What kind of finishes did you use? Did you waterproof on top of the Hempcrete?
Yes. Yeah, so the water, because of the shower recess by definition has to be waterproof, and so you ignore the vapor permeability at that point. You go, we're not going to make this vapor permeable. Doesn't matter, the rest of the room is. So the waterproof membrane is a cementitious membrane, and once that goes on, it soaks into the hempcrete, and then the first layer of render goes straight over that.
Okay, so a cement base, and then
It's highly modified. I can't remember the brand, but there are lots of membranes like that. It's not a single pad acrylic. Acrylic. It's a grittier kind of fluid. But
yeah. I'm with you. Good on you. Okay, thanks.
Other questions? There's a roving microphone here. Don't tell me we've answered all your questions. This is impossible.
That's me again. Oh, just fantastic. You guys are talking about hempcrete buildings. So did you highlight anything about the hemp blocks, which I'm sadly involved in?
Yes, unfortunately, Johan, you arrived a little bit late when I did an intro to the various forms of hemp. So Johan's involved in manufacturing hemp blocks. And if you want to know about hemp blocks in detail, here's your man.
I've got a project in Balmoral, so I'll definitely be talking to you because that's what my client wants to do. He wants to build it by himself and take as long as he takes. So we think blocks will be amazing.
Is there, for someone who hasn't used hemp before, is there any good go-to resource for detailing the things that you've been talking about? Is there an association of hempcrete? You mentioned, yeah. Yep,
there are. There are various. So there's the overarching kind of national one would be the Australian Hemp Council. So it's the Australian Hemp Council who are pushing through with the Australian standard, and then it can get a little bit sort of tribal below that. So if you want to go down the block route, there's a series of people that you would speak to. If you want to go down the in situ route, a series of people that you would speak to. There are training courses run by different people with corporate interests, I guess, in selling their product. So they will train you in how to use and install their product.
Can I be unashamedly promote the actually Hemp Connect forum that's coming up from the Australian Hemp Council? So if anyone's interested in learning about building with hemp, whether it's blocks or hempcrete, beams, panels, it's all happening, and there's a fantastic event happening in Melbourne from the 25th to the 27th of June. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was going to be my wrap-up slide. So now you know where to go.
And tomorrow there's a bit more about hemp. So industrial hemp, I'll be representing the New South Wales, one of those hemp groups, there's so many, and talk about with a hemp builder, hemp grower, a group that grows industrial hemp. And I'll have a little chat myself about options of hempcrete. That's it. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock, upstairs in the Sustainable Forum.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Johan.
Hi, I remember you talking thing about bushfires with this material. What about other natural calamity?
Sorry, say again, other?
Like earthquakes or like heavy rains, floods. How does the material act in that?
So floods and other... I mean, it's interesting. My house is in a flood zone as well as flood, so nothing to make you strong in this world than being given a flood zone to deal with and acoustic requirements. And it was interesting. I had to write a report and get it approved that our house in a flood zone, I mean, it's a bit tricky because our house is 130 years old, and I advocated that if there was a flood, I'm sure the front of the house would probably be washed away too, because I didn't want to use double brick or brick veneer at the back. And the studies I've seen recently, it actually showed that hempcrete does absorb the water, but it actually dries and doesn't just degrade it. I don't have that study with me, but I saw it. These other guys might be able to verify that. But it's it's really up to the council and your certifier. But I don't know anything about earthquake areas or.
Okay, so what we have done one in not an earthquake zone, although it might be in the Hunter Valley. A lot of earthquakes up there, but mine subsidence. So we've had to tackle with that one, and they basically treat it like any other masonry building. So if it's a big building, you break the building up into smaller modules, and the foundations are done such that if and when, probably when, not rather than if, it subsides when the big mine underneath starts collapsing, then the building can be jacked up. That's standard mine subsidence design process. But we don't have a nominated earthquake zone in Australia. I think that might be being looked at given that the number of earthquakes that occur in the Greater Hunter region. Whether they're related to longwall mining or not, we don't know yet, but who knows?
So just one thing popped in my mind just one thing popped in my mind where you were explaining. Do you know the Ferro Creek cement where they introduce like a chicken mesh in it? So can we be introducing some supporting material in the hemp blocks to make it more sturdy?
Well, the blocks currently, you probably need to talk to Johan about that in detail. Essentially, the hemp products that we're building in Australia at the moment are non-load bearing, and therefore there's another structure involved one way or another, and that can occur. That can be in various forms. So it could be a big post and beam with just infill between post and beams, or like brick veneer, a continuous frame with a skin of blockwork on the external face. You could choose to put that on the internal face, and there'd be some good reasons to do that. But there is a load-bearing block apparently being developed or made in Belgium, but I don't think it would be cost-effective to import that because of the mass, in Australia. So at the moment, where the industry is largely just working on non-load-bearing. I should just mention, and in addition to the Hemp Connect forum, there's a hemp building directory which is run by Jeremy here, who's running around with the camera. And that's hempbuilding.au. Don't put the .com in there because that takes it somewhere else. It's just hempbuilding.au. And also, there is some really good research being done in various universities. UTS has got a couple of programs running, and the University of Tasmania. And Tasmania is a bit of a hemp hotspot. I'm off there next week to talk to various people down there. And there are great things happening down there. But Arno Castell is doing some great research at UTS, so there's a lot of high-end stuff going on, and it's well worth keeping your eyes open for what is coming up. And the Australian Hemp Council is the overarching national body that promotes, supports the whole industry. So keep your eye out for various things that the AHC Hemp Council are pushing on with. And I think that is it. The timekeeper is giving me daggers because she's the sort of person you do not want to cross. So I think that's it. If you want to talk to us or Johan or Lisa from the Hemp Council over here, this is Lisa. We'll be around for a while afterwards. Thank you very much.